Yara, look up. Thanks. Say that again? I think that'll be a nice idea to explore.
Well, I like the fire department. It makes me feel safe. I think it's the cornerstone of the community.
Well, that wraps up our session for today. Please remember that your historical cultural literacy topics are due at the end of the week. Does anyone have any questions from today's reading?
What does it mean to be?
What does it mean to
What does it mean to be? What does it mean to be empowered?
Hi, Miss Corinda.
Hey, Shy. What are you up to?
Well, I wanted to ask you about the project I told you about.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Where did the Urban League come from?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm thinking about doing my project on the Urban League. Do you have some time to tell me about it?
Time, girl. How much time do you have?
Urban League of Greater Hartford, Project Ready Legacy Empowers Project.
My name is Patricia Kelly. I am the president, founder, and CEO of the Ebony Horsewomen.
My name is Kyle Ken Anderson. I am the fourth son of Wilfred and Jackie Anderson from Hartford, Connecticut. We've been here approximately 4 generations. I've been here my entire life.
With the Urban League, it presented an opportunity to take the culmination of all my experiences, as well as the things that were important to me, social justice, the Black community.
I think my very first interaction was that we were kind of housed in the same building at 1229 Albany Avenue. I was working for Neighborhood Legal Services, and the Urban League was also in that same building.
I was a community employment specialist, and my job was actually to go out and help people find jobs and have them maintain a work ethic and give them job-ready life skills.
The words that are constantly utilized in the Urban League are empowerment and the movement. And once I realized or discovered that those were an opportunity for me to be a part of professionally, not just in volunteer work or not just altruistically, but actually professionally to make it part of my vocation. It was a perfect opportunity, and so I was excited about the opportunity to be a part of the Urban League.
Do you remember when we were talking about the Great Migration and where all the blacks came from the south to the north? Imagine 1 million people coming within 20 years between 1910 and 1930, and they migrated from the south to the north. That would be like 500 people that you knew leaving every day. 500 people.
So they all just came to Hartford, Connecticut?
Well, not all of them. Since they moved to the north, some of them came to Hartford, some came to New York and Massachusetts and different places across the U.S. They were trying to get above the Cotton Curtain, since that was what was really divided the South from the North.
All right.
So, in 1910, there was a woman by the name of Ruth Standish Baldwin. She was a philanthropist in New York, and she noticed there were 90,000 unemployed blacks just in New York City. She felt that she should do something about it. There were so many agencies who were trying to do a little bit to help people to get skilled and trained, and she figured it would be better to join forces so everybody can work smarter and better together. So she invited people over to her house to figure out how we can get untrained and unexperienced workers to be successful.
So when did they get to Hartford, Miss Granda?
Girl, I asked you how much time you had. Okay, fine. We'll speed up the story to Hartford.
Okay. And so, Miss Kelly, you grew up here
I did.
in Hartford, Connecticut, right?
I did.
So what was your childhood like?
Well, I can tell you this, where we sit right now, you couldn't come here as a black person. You were not allowed in this community at all. When I was born in an area of Hartford that was called the Bottom. And it was near the railroad tracks. There were several streets connected to the area where CRT is now and the railroad tracks. And that's where black people lived. Black people did not cross Main Street and come up into this area. This area was occupied by Jewish and Italian residents. It was not black. But in 1953, my parents bought a home on Clark Street from a Holocaust survivor by the name of Betsy Kaplan. And we moved into Clark Street, being the second or I think the third family, black family in the area. And it was quite uncomfortable setting because there were many who felt we should not be there. I think the first time I heard the N-word was from a little Italian girl who called me that, and I chased her all the way home. I wasn't sure what it meant, but I knew it wasn't great for what she said. So this area was very much segregated, but very prosperous as well. And by the time I went to Weaver High School in the mid-60s, I really didn't know how to get there from Clark Street because we weren't allowed in this community.
So in 1964, there was another woman, but her name was Rachel Milton, and she was right here in the city of Hartford. Rachel had a vision, and she wanted to help the blacks to be successful in the city of Hartford, so she assembled a team. Grant and her family were philanthropists then and now. She was also a historian in Connecticut and an activist for the disadvantaged. She was the president of the Junior League of Hartford from 1949 to 1950. Horace O'Neill was a Supreme Court justice and also was the league's founding CEO. He was born in Summit, New Jersey, and served on the board until 1978. James Peter II was born in Arkansas but grew up in Louisiana. He came to Hartford in the early 40s and was the commissioner on Hartford's authority and served on several boards in the city. After being helpful with the Greater Hartford Urban League, he helped to found the Greater Hartford YMCA. He really had a heart for the community. Olcott Smith was an Aetna executive. He was almost like the corporate presence in the Urban League, but he had a heart for the community. He brought together Hartford and the suburbs to address common problems, and meetings brought 500 people from over 30 towns. He wanted to advocate for the city's poor black and minority residents. Rachel Taylor Milton. She was a distinguished educator and a civil rights crusader who we consider the mother of our Urban League of Greater Hartford. And she and the founders were able to raise $90,000 through grants and individual donations of people giving about $5 each to help bring this dream to fruition. So all of these people came by the guidance of Rachel and her vision to bring some of that National Urban League magic from New York City right here to the city of Hartford. Now, after they got together and started to get the movement in action, they realized they needed help from the national office. And that's where we got our first appointed executive director, William Bill Brown.
And so, what can you tell me about Bill Brown, about your memory?
Oh my God. Mr. Brown, first of all, a gentleman of the finest quality, a very smart, intuitive man with a compassion for his people. And he knew instinctively the history of, let's say, the African American community, what the needs were, how to best help the community. He was grounded in facts. He wasn't an emotional man, but he was grounded in a lot of facts. And he worked from a premise of there were some proven activities, some proven programs, some proven ways in which to help the community. And he worked diligently to try to bring a lot of those to fruition.
One thing sticks out of my mind is when I was a student at Weaver, Jesse Jackson came to our school in the auditorium, and Mr. Brown was with him. And Mr. Brown was always there for big events, big things that affected our community in a positive way. Mr. Brown and he knew me as a child, and we went to the same church, and he would always look at me and says, "Anderson, I'm watching you." He would always say, "Keep up the good work," because he saw me come up, grow up as a youth, and then as an adolescent, and then to a young man. And he would always have encouraging just words of wisdom for me. And no one knew that. And he was always Mr. Brown. And I never knew growing up how big of an impact in the community that he was to us. But he was always very caring, very nurturing, and he would just see me in church and say, "I'm watching you, young man. Keep up the good work."
Now, was he part of your early employment in the Urban League?
No, I actually, when I came home from college, I did work for the Urban League, but I actually worked under the president of Esther Bush. She was the president when I was working for the Urban League.
What exactly was the impact of the Urban League on the city of Hartford?
It was a big thing. I remember the EOD dinners were huge. That was one of their main fundraisers for supporting the Urban League. And I remember going to EOD dinners and being involved in the activities in the Urban League. One, as a volunteer, even after I started working there, I still kind of kept a little presence there as a volunteer. But when I worked there, the programs that the Urban League was running, the housing program, there were a lot of programs that the Urban League were engaged in. Also, too, they did a lot of community events too. There was a fundraiser from the Urban League Guild, and not many people know about the Urban League Guild, but the Guild was an arm of volunteers who would put on events to raise money for the Urban League. And at that time, the Ebony Fashion Fair would come to Hartford, and that was run by the Urban League and the Urban League's Guild.
The Urban League is here to explicitly but not exclusively champion the needs and the value of Black people, Black lives, and Black contributions to the overall well-being of the region. And so while a number of agencies are focused on rebuilding communities in general, or working towards creating opportunities for people who are disadvantaged, the Urban League uniquely says that that there's a race component to that. And so when we come to the table, we often have the authority and the credibility to say that this issue goes beyond just simply economic revitalization. It's actually focusing on putting black people in a position that they have historically been disenfranchised to. Lives change and then get changed again. One of the things that I've learned or seen at a more practical level in this job is that we can help a person get a job.
I think people knew that the Urban League was there to support them, and mainly also too, that I think that was the main hub for someone to go to get some job skill training, because that's one of the jobs that I had. The job that I had was to make sure that people were employed, and then also kind of track them and be a job coach, okay? And then within the job coach, you gave them employability skills, you gave them life skills. You were able to communicate with folks who were looking for a job and looking to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. And the Urban League was that vehicle in the community for them to go find a job and get that kind of support.
And so that's one of our key roles. And the other is to advocate for equity. There is this these challenges in education and employment, income, housing, and health, and we uniquely are positioned to be that a comprehensive agency to address all those issues. Again, those are all issues that unfortunately are persistent within the black community, but many other agencies focus on one or two of those things, but we focus on all of them and see them as something of a continuum. If you can address the education issue, then you position people for employment, and then once you get them employed, then you position them for gainful income, and then once they establish consistent and gainful income, then they can afford housing, and then in there as well as health equity. So all those things are important, and those are the two things that I think that we do uniquely and what we bring to the region.
In its 55th year, where do you see the future of the league going?
Well, I don't know that what we're doing in year 55 is that much different than was done in year one. We just had our annual Equal Opportunity Day dinner where we celebrated this 55th year, but the timing also had it that this is the 400th year since the first Africans were enslaved in America, and I like to say that someone was trying to figure out how to memorialize this period, this 400 years, and well, how do you celebrate 400 years of enslavement? And so what I like to say is that it's 400 years of actually fighting for equality and justice and inclusion. And so in this 400th year of that fight, and in our 55th year of working towards empowering people, I think the same thing is as important, was important then as what's important now, and is that we be valued, we and black people, African Americans, people of color, and we be valued for what we can that we be valued for, that we have not just equal opportunities, but we be regarded equally as everyone else in the community.
And today, Urban League is responsible for serving over 3,000 people every year, mainly in the areas of community and adult education, workforce and job development, health and wellness. Then we have social justice and advocacy, and then a youth development in which we can see you.
And just like that, we're here, huh?
Well, not just like that, but pretty much. We're here, right here with you.
Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Kunda, for helping me.
Anytime, Cheyenne. Cheyenne, let me ask you something. What does the Urban League mean to you? I mean, you're here almost every day. So, what do you plan to do as part of the movement to empower communities and change lives?
Well, I really like the trips. When we went to Baltimore and Philadelphia, we saw many amazing sights. In Baltimore, we visited the African Wax Museum. And in Philadelphia, we went to Temple and Cheney University. But my favorite part about the Urban League would be when we do things for the community. For example, every year before school starts, we hold a back-to-school event where we give backpacks and school supplies to the students of Hartford. Then, during the time of Thanksgiving, we make a care package for the homeless team. My favorite part is Christmas, where we come together and we hand out toys to the kids who are less fortunate. I really like coming to the Urban League, and it's a time where I can think. I have the freedom to work in the way I want with no distractions, and I can be me. Because of the Urban League, and because of that, I'm empowered to be a pediatric nurse. At the end of the day, I'm able to tackle anything.
That sounds amazing, Cheyenne. Thanks for stopping by.
Of course.
I am empowered to be a pediatrician.
All right.
I am empowered to be a nurse in the military.
Okay. We're looking directly at the camera. Okay. Do I go now? I'm empowered to be a dancer.
Well,
Oh, I'm not good at
you're
this.
similar to.
Don't stare at me.
You serious?
No, no.
Oh.
Stop staring. I can't. I'm getting. Okay. I'm empowered to be a mom.
I'm empowered to be a geologist.
Urban League of Greater Hartford, empowering communities and changing lives.